everyone! It's Christmas time and my channel may be minuscule, but I really wanted to talk about a specific story. Whenever someone mentions this period of the year, most people think about the presents or the songs. But what crosses my mind is the novella written by Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol. I first encountered it by listening to one of my favorite YouTubers voicing the German translation of this story 5 years ago, and I was strongly moved. Since then, it has always had a special place in my heart. I have a lot to say about the story, but for now, I want to focus on one specific theme, the portrayal of greed in this story. However, I firstly want to give some cultural context to the story and summarize it so you have all the information you need to understand my points. The book was written in 1843, quickly became popular and was bought over 6,000 times within the first week of its release. It remained a bestseller throughout the rest of the century and is still one of the most popular works by Charles Dickens. Until now, it's estimated to have been bought over 20 million times all around the world. The first adaptation film was a silent movie published in 1901. After that, it has been adapted by many different companies, some popular ones being The Muppets in 1992 or Disney in 1929, and the most recent being the Netflix one from 2022. The main reason for this story's success is the reflection of many cultural and societal elements of its time. The main focus was on the capitalistic system of the early 18th century, the poverty and social inequality that came along with it. There were no social justice systems or insurances for the poor people, which increased the gap between poor and rich. Charity, which mostly occurred during Christian holidays, was the main source of money for people in need, which is mentioned many times in this text. Charles combined these monetary topics with the celebration of Christmas and the holiday spirit. They were seen as very important because it was a way to express gratitude and generosity towards your family and friends. It was a way to distract yourself from the day-to-day stress by spending time with the most important people in your life, giving them gifts, playing games, and finding peace. By tying such heavy topics with something that everyone relates to, you can create an impactful story that everyone understands and is interested in. Many people think this is just a silly Christmas story, but it actually has many deep themes. One of them is greed, which we'll discuss today. Before you hear about why this story portrays greed and rich people during the Victorian era in a great way, I would like to let my best friend Ray take over the reading and summarize the story, so we all are on the same page. He won't go in too much depth, but he has to mention many details because they're important for the analysis.
We are introduced to our main character, Ebenezer Scrooge, a rich man everyone around him hates. He is described as selfish and with a rotten personality, in an exaggerated but effective way. Everyone in town avoids him and he enjoys it because it makes him feel special. He doesn't care about anyone around him. He's never scared or emotionally affected by anything. His only friend Marley died 7 years ago on Christmas, which is his excuse for being so bitter on Christmas. While he works one day before Christmas, he is visited by his nephew Fred. He tries to convince him to accept his invitation to his Christmas celebration, but he declines. Then two men come to ask him if he wants to donate anything for the poor, and again, he harshly refuses to do so. His main reason is that his tax money is already enough to spend on the poor in prisons and workhouses, but allows him to do that if the day afterwards he would arrive earlier. Ebenezer goes outside, and when he returns, he sees his old business partner, Jacob Marley, on his doorknob, and is afraid. In the night, Marley visits him again, in the form of a chained ghost. His chains are heavy, large, and made out of money and contracts. It's shown that Marley was very much like Ebenezer in life, selfish, greedy, and isolated, only caring for himself, his money, and business. His lifestyle cursed his soul in death to wander the earth, weighed down by his chains, and to never find peace. Ebenezer has a hard time processing what he sees, doubting his own eyes. But when he starts believing what he sees, he is horrified and asks for something comforting. But there is nothing, again proving how much of a horrible person he is. Marley tells him that he will be visited by 3 ghosts, and if he doesn't accept their help to redeem himself, he will have an even worse fate than him in his afterlife. Ebenezer is shocked by hearing Marley talking in such a strange and unusual way. When Marley leaves, Ebenezer sees a lot of ghosts similar to him, floating through the night restlessly. On the next day, he wakes up at the same time as when he went to sleep, and notices that time is frozen. That's when he is visited by the ghost of Christmas past. To be more specific, the ghost of his Christmas past. He's a weird candle who shows himself in different ages, shapes and species at the same time. The spirit drags him outside and he tries to think of some excuse not to, but fails. The ghost establishes that they can't be seen and they can't interfere with the past. At first, the spirit shows Ebenezer a past Christmas when he was a lonely child. Out of nowhere, Ebenezer admits that the day before, a man sang at the front of his door, and he wished he had given him some money. This is the first time he expresses any regrets, and he's very honest. Then the spirit shows him a Christmas with his younger sister Fan. They seem to have a really sweet relationship, and to be close. She's very excited to have the opportunity to celebrate Christmas with him. It's explained that unfortunately, she died in her adulthood at some point, after having her child Fred. This death was clearly difficult for Ebenezer to process, and may be a reason why he was so harsh to Fred. Next, the spirit shows him how he celebrated Christmas with his boss as a young adult. He had invited him, and many other people for free. They had a very cheerful time together. Ebenezer is filled with nostalgia, and misses this time. But the story takes a dark turn very quickly. The ghost of Christmas past showed him how he sabotaged the most important relationship in his life, his relationship with his ex-fiancée Belle. When she broke up with him, she expressed her dissatisfaction with him because of his selfish behaviour. Ebenezer begs the ghost of Christmas past to not show him anything anymore because he cannot endure the suffering anymore, but he shows him his Belle with her new husband talking about him and Marley. After that session of emotional damage, he is teleported back into the present, where he goes with the spirit of Christmas present to see how people he sees every day celebrate Christmas without him. Ebenezer willingly follows the spirit and exclaims with excitement that he wants to learn his lesson. They watch Bob's family and listen to their conversations. All of Bob's family members hate Ebenezer, except for Bob himself. He also finds out that one of Bob's children, Tiny Tim, is very sick and will die soon if Ebenezer doesn't redeem himself. They then go to Fred, who is the only person from their entire family who believes he can change. While everyone else makes fun of him, that's when Ebenezer starts to understand how much joy such events can bring, that he needs the company of his family, and that he should appreciate Bob and Fred more. Before the ghost of Christmas present leaves, he shows Ebenezer two starving Victorian children, called Ignorance and Want. He is horrified seeing them aged, despite being so young, due to their harsh life. When Ebenezer asks if there are any resources for them, the ghost repeats his previous words about the prisons and workhouses, making him regret what he said. Finally, he is visited by the ghost of Christmas yet to come, and is thrown into a situation he has no clues about. He hears about a rich person that died recently. They attend the funeral, where everyone celebrates except Ebenezer, who feels sorry for this unknown person. However, he is still stuck with the idea of Tiny Tim having to die so young, and keeps asking the ghost of Christmas yet to come about him. He asks if what he is seeing is a future that is set in stone, or just a possible outcome. But this last spirit doesn't make a sound. He sobs because he is desperate to know if he can change anything about this child's path. But then he finds who the guy is that died, and nobody cared about. It was Ebenezer. He cries even more. He is terrified. He begs to be given the chance to redeem himself. He feels that his mindset and morals have changed, and deeply desires to prove that. And then he wakes up back in his home. He asks a child on the street what day it is, and he responds that it's Christmas. He tells him to buy the biggest turkey from the store, and sends it to Bob. He gets dressed, shaved, while shaking of excitement, and invites himself to Fred's house. On the day after Christmas, he goes in extra early to work and waits for Bob. When Bob arrives late, he is very nervous about the consequences of that, but Ebenezer surprises him. He tells him to go back home to spend some quality time with his family, and that from now on, his salary will be raised. In the next few years, he worked on himself and became an excellent member of society. He took over the cost of tithing treatment, and everyone in his city enjoyed his company. Now that your memories of the story are refreshed, I would like to explain why he displays the deadly sin of greed perfectly. It's important to note that this text was written in the Victorian time in England, when Christianity was the main religion, and society was heavily influenced by the church. So it's pretty common that back then, many writings would contain biblical elements. While this story is not focused on any religion, whenever people talk about greed, one of the main deadly sins in Christianity, Ebenezer is one of the first people that come to mind. He is a pretty outstanding character with very sharp characteristics, his main one being greed. In the Bible, greed is described as the most evil sin of all. It's the addiction to wealth, to the point you start ruining people's life because of it. This story makes it very obvious that this is exactly Ebenezer's problem. He is described in an exaggerated way, but this helps much better getting specific points across. For example, he is described as a huge miser. He owns a large wealth but hoards it instead of spending it. You can tell that by many moments, such as he doesn't like any fires in his workplace, even though he has enough coal and money, causing him and Bob to freeze. The writing of the story made his evil very palpable. Something that comes hand in hand with greed is pride, the exaggerated focus on yourself. He treated other people, especially his workers, horribly because he felt like he was superior towards them. He heavily implies he thinks poor people deserve to be sent to jail, and admitted he wants them to just die. He has these views because, through his eyes, poor people were useless to society. He was convinced the only reason they were poor is because they are lazy and refused to work, which was a common belief for the rich in that era. This made him believe he deserved his superior position in society because he contributed to it, so he had more rights than other people. He felt like he was just allowed to exploit them in the attempt to satisfy his needs to be as rich as possible. He only cared about himself and his money and refused to learn about the struggles of the poor and lower class, which also translates to the members of the upper class. We see this when he finds out about the conditions of Bob's family, ignorance and want, living day to day. His surprise and horrified reaction shows he had no idea about how poor people lived. At first, when he was young, he was a poor child who worked a lot to simply survive. From the quotes from his ex-fiancée Belle, we can assume he used to be a pretty nice guy. In flashback, she explained that when they met, he was a loving person who cared about the people around him, but when he started earning a lot of money, that's when he started becoming selfish. His behaviour slowly made her bitter whenever she was around him. She was able to feel his greed started eating his core beliefs. but wasn't able to pinpoint the issue that at the start. After a while, it became way more evident that he became selfish, and she wasn't able to be in a relationship with such a man anymore. She didn't feel truly loved by him because she had less money, so she broke off the engagement. Just like any other addiction, his greed developed over time. He started small, thinking it was just nice to have financial stability, but he didn't know how to control himself. He turned cold and manipulated people in as many ways as possible into giving him cash. His greed transformed him into a heartless monster who had no compassion for the people around him, that led him becoming isolated from everyone else around him. His negative emotions from the rejection and solitude caused a void inside of him that he tried to fill with money. That's how he became his own villain. He was sucked into a spiral that nobody was able to get him out of, except himself. After he was shown from another perspective that his behaviour was lifelong damaging for the people around him, he realised what he became. He realised many of his actions cannot be fixed, and that these people didn't deserve to be treated in the way he did. He understood he was a horrible person, that he ruined the lives of the people around him. He wasn't evil for the sake of being evil. He was evil because he drove himself into an addiction to wealth. And when he laid down his desires to have as much money as possible, that's when he stopped being so full of himself. He lost motivation to do the things he did. That's what changed him. What I really like about Ebenezer is that he didn't just stop being evil. He could have stopped exploiting other people, which would have been enough to say he changed. But instead, he started helping the people around him. He sent a huge turkey to Bob's house, just because he wanted to. He raised his salary to help him support his family better. He provided for Tiny Tim's treatment so he wouldn't have to die at such a young age. It's like all these years, he was a flower that refuses to accept the water that was given to him. But then he noticed he dried, accepted the water, blossomed, and became a sympathetic person. This story doesn't only explore the reason why there are so many problems in this world, but also explains that it can be fixed from the roots. Now I'll let Lari take over the introduction and end the video.
Now we've come to the end, and I wanted to give huge thanks to my best friend Lari for voicing the majority of the video. I worked on preparing some Christmas presents. The first one is the painting you were able to watch me draw during this video. I also had some stuff going on in my life that slowed the production of this video, but he helped me to deal with it. He also added some interesting details to this essay because he knows the story better than I do. That's why I would love to credit him for his contribution in this video. And of course, I'd like to thank you for watching this. It means to both of us a lot because we are pretty passionate about this story and my channel is really small. I hope you have a nice celebration and bye!